Hello, my name is Lily Bastian. I'm a certified nurse midwife and currently working as the midwifery clinical practice advisor at the American College of Nurse-Midwives. ACNM is partnering with Nell Tharpe to seamlessly transition Nell's Midwife as Surgical First Assistant program to ACNM. The ACNM First Assistant program will continue to deliver an excellent educational offering modeled after Nell Tharpe's First Assistant program. ACNM is offering the Midwife as Surgical First Assistant book, the First Assistant exam to test your knowledge after reading the book, a helpful webinar, and will be offering a virtual course starting in the spring of 2021. I first took the Midwife as Surgical First Assistant course with Nell in 2010. I was working at a community hospital that required the midwives to become first assistants. It was an invaluable skill because the surgical assistants were not in-house and often 20 to 30 minutes away from the hospital. This skill also enables you to provide continuity of care to clients. Many clients are very relieved to have a familiar face in the operating room. When I transitioned to working for an HMO, it continued to be an essential skill and helped the midwives to be more integrated into the team. Now I'd like to introduce Nell Tharpe, creator of the original Midwife as Surgical First Assistant program. Nell, thank you for taking the time to answer a few questions today.
Thank you, Lily. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
So, what do you think are the three most important aspects of the first assistant role during a cesarean?
Yeah, that's a tough question because there's so many important things. But the first one, I think, is to really have a good grounding in aseptic technique and what it means when you're in the OR. So while that's not specifically the first assistant's role, it's the foundation for everything the first assistant does. And second of all, I think that it's essential that the first assistant understands what the first assistant role is in that specific facility with each physician they work with, and the roles of the other team members. So the scrub, the circulator, the anesthesia personnel, the pediatric team, it varies from so much from hospital to hospital. And then lastly, I think the other really important piece is for midwives to bring midwifery into the OR. Because first and foremost, this should be a birth. This should be a celebration. Even if there are complications that are causing the reason for the C-section, the midwife can be there at the field to receive the baby, to provide reassurance, to help with continuity of care, to understand what actually is happening to this client and help them talk about it afterwards. So really bringing midwifery to the table, literally, is one of the most important things that I think this is all about.
Yeah, and I think clients would really agree with that too. It really helps for their healing and transitioning into parenting to have the midwife be there during that experience.
And for many midwives, they're working as laborists, and so they may not know the clients personally, but often they will be the person who does rounds. So you still get that continuity of care piece. And one of the other things that I really like about it, which is not one of the core things, but I just wanted to share it, is that in so many situations, midwives are always asking the physicians for help. And by providing first assistant services, the physicians now get to ask the midwives for help, and there is a greater reciprocity in the relationship. And so it really helps develop a peer relationship as opposed to a hierarchical relationship.
Yeah, I experienced that too, that you just felt more integrated into the team. Yeah, great. All right, so can you describe some of the barriers midwives encounter when expanding their midwifery practice to include first assistant activities?
Well, this has gotten much better over the years, Lily. It used to be that I would regularly have people who were the first midwife at their practice. And I have to put out just a huge kudos to all of those midwives who have paved the way and have really worked to have a consistent system in place in many facilities. So when the midwife gets there, they're told this is expected part of your practice, and here's what you have to do in order to add this to your credentials. But in other locations, it's been done one midwife at a time. And therefore, the wheel gets recreated over and over and over. And often the medical staff office in those instances will come to the midwife and say, so what is it that you have to do to be credentialed for this? And when it really should be the other way. Mm-hmm. And so that's one of the reasons why the textbook has really worked to provide checklists and guidance for medical staff offices, sample policies, so that it can be clear. And one of the huge barriers in a situation where there isn't an established policy or a set of educational or credentialing standards is that sometimes the approval to practice is based on personalities and not on objective criteria. So I really stress to everyone that there should be objective criteria present at your facility, that everyone who is looking to add the first assistant activities to their scope of practice and privileges, everyone's held accountable to the same standard and expectations.
Great. And how do state regulations affect midwives when they expand their practice to include first assistant activities?
Yeah, this is the wild card in this. So, some states have clear guidance, not necessarily under midwifery. So New Jersey, for example, has it under medicine and under surgery. So even though it affects midwives, you have to find it in the right place. If you just read the midwifery rules, you don't get the information that you have to have at least a 30-hour didactic course, 10 second assist, and 20 first assist before you can be credentialed, and that you can't participate in any other surgery than C-sections. Other states specify that you need to follow the AORN guidance, which then has a carve-out for certified midwives and certified nurse midwives, because ACNM is the entity recognized to provide the guidance for what is required. And then some states include it in, or don't include it as in global. So if you look at the scope of practice and you see that it includes care of the woman throughout the childbearing cycle, and there's no exceptions, then this is, reasonable. Many states now say, according to ACNM, in their regulations, they will actually cite ACNM. Many other states do not. So the ones that cite ACNM make it much easier. Some states will actually cite the AORN, so the Association of Perioperative Registered Nurses, because they have national standards. And their position statement about advanced practice nurses in the operating room does defer to ACNM. But it defers to it, and people have to see that little segment of it. And then there are the places that have a very vague scope of practice and don't say anything. And so what I caution people is, look through. You are held accountable to what your rules and regs and your statutes say. And if it is not addressed, then you're good to go. It's within your scope of practice according to ACNM. So as long as there is no prohibition. So one state does not address first assisting with C-sections, but allows the midwife to assist with everything except gynecologic surgery. So that by default infers it. And so it really takes some interpretation, and people should not worry about it. But if they have questions, they should get clarification.
And that's something too that ACNM can help you with. My department deals with practice issues. And so if you're hitting, a roadblock and you need some assistance, you can contact ACNM.
And one of the reasons why the state regulations are not included in the text is that they change, they get updated, they evolve. And so if it's in the text and the midwife assumes that that's correct information, then there may not be meeting the standard of care expectations of their state. And it's important to remember that every state can have regulations that are more restrictive than national or than ACNM. And then hospitals can again have regulations that are more restrictive than state regulations. They can't be more liberal, but they can be more restrictive. And in some cases, that is the case.
Well, that is so helpful. And I imagine people are going to find just that little discussion about that really helpful to help guide them and take steps if they are indeed paving the way in their practice. Great. Well, Nell, now that you're no longer teaching first assistant workshops or classes, what are your plans?
Well, I want to say that I have loved teaching this for, oh golly, it's going on 2 decades here. And I have met so many wonderful people, and they've really been an inspiration. So what I'm doing next is a build out from that. And I want to focus on suturing skills and perinatal repair. So the first assist workshops really helped me kind of see where people's suturing skills were as midwives, both as students and experienced midwives, and made me realize that there is room for growth. And so I'll be focusing on perinatal repair and suturing skills workshops, and working on some materials to help support those. And then I'll continue my work with the main Perinatal Quality Collaborative in my free time.
Well, wonderful. Thank you so much. We are just so grateful for this body of work and honored to continue the tradition and to continue offering it at the American College of Nurse-Midwives. We will include a link here so that people can click on the link and be brought to midwife.org.
That's great. I know that people are regularly asking for information about workshops. And so I will be very glad to get the link to guide them to the correct place once everything is up and running. And I am so thrilled that this is going to be part of ACNM. I think that it will enhance the credibility of our profession, especially when there's an expansion of practice like this. So thank you for helping to move this forward, Lily. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing it thrive in the years to come.
Yes. All right. Thanks a lot, everyone.